We said risk assessment is challenging. We don't understand all the threats. We don't know what our vulnerabilities are. Of course, those two play into. Likelihood of a successful attack, of course, is going to depend on what sort of vulnerabilities you might have and who's trying to target you. But we said, well, if you can come up with a probability and what happens as a result of an attack, then you can compute the risk. That's how you quantify or assess the risk. And you can try to reduce it, but that's really a question of managing that risk. How do we manage? What options do we have for managing the risk that our business is exposed to on the cyber front? So we talked about assessing it, but if it's too high, then of course we like to reduce it. So how do you reduce cyber risk? As we said before we get into reduction, assessing required the likelihood as well as the impact. So how do you assess the impact? It's the expected loss we are talking about. So it's expected loss is really loss multiply the probability. So we do have to get to the loss. And when you talk about loss, it could be reputation loss. Target, of course, suffered, including decrease in sales. It's the cost of calling somebody in. So, for example, if you're Sony and you called FireEye or Mandiant to come and figure out what happened, I'm sure they paid for that. Mandiant or FireEye got compensated really well. Your response, there may be legal costs. You may have to buy identity theft protection for your customers and things like that. It's real dollars, reputational, what you do in the aftermath. All that has to add up to sort of the cost or the loss that you would attribute to a certain attack. And expected, I said, was that value multiplied by the probability. So that's really risk. Risk was probability times impact. So maybe impact is loss. So let's just talk about loss here. So this one would still be talking about sort of assessing risk. Now let's talk about how do we manage risk. So there are only three things you can do once you come up with some sort of a risk estimate. You can say, well, I can live with it. In that case, you're accepting the risk. You may want to transfer it. So the risk is transferred to another party. So if something bad happens to you, the consequences or the cost is going to be borne by somebody else. That somebody else is going to do it only if they are paid to be in that business, and that business is the insurance business. So you can buy insurance, and by buying insurance, you're transferring it to whoever insures you. The other option is you can reduce it. How do you reduce it? Well, you're going to reduce it by deploying new technology solutions, maybe a more expensive, more effective firewall. You can reduce it by educating your people or having training and things like that. More security awareness, of course, is going to ensure that it's less likely that they make a mistake. So that's going to reduce the likelihood or the probability of some adverse event, which we know was a factor in the way we computed risk. So managing, once you have an estimate of the risk, there are a couple of options on how you can deal with that risk. As we said, this transfer thing happens in a lot of other domains. You buy insurance for your car, for your health, and things like that.